It has been 9 years since the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi took office. What has been the performance of the Indian economy since the Modi years began in 2014 is the topic of our discussion. Of course, the complete picture cannot be painted by one data point alone, and in order to understand what happened, say, to grasp the trend of the economy in the past 9 years, we need to study several variables, and based on that, we need to arrive at a broader picture. That's where I have made my modest attempt, and I'm starting with the example of GDP. If prices increase by 10% across the board without additional goods and services being produced in an economy, GDP can also increase by 10%. So, keeping that in the back of our mind, let's progress further in terms of, say, to understand what happened in the past 9 years, say, to average income levels, employment levels, inflation, and poverty and inequality. We must examine many such variables. How healthy is the financial system? How is the economy transforming are some of the crucial aspects that I will be dealing with. It is also important to evaluate the economy in a broader context by comparing it with other preferably comparable economies, taking into account the government's agenda for economic reform, which is also very important. First and foremost, let's take a view on the gross domestic product and its growth rates. Indian GDP was rupees 159.7 lakh crores at the end of March 2023, up from 98 lakh crore at the end of March 2014 before the Modi government took office. Over the 9 years, the NDA government in India has shown a GDP growth of around 63%. Whereas for the period between 2005 and 2014, the statistics shows that India's absolute GDP grew by 97%. The 9 year period, that is to say 2014 to 23, can be divided into three distinct phases based on annual GDP growth rates. The annual GDP growth rates for the first 3 years, that is to say FY 15 to 17, was 8%, and from then over the next 3 years, that is to say FY 18 to 20, the growth rate decelerated sharply, falling to below 4% in FY 20. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic in FY 21, GDP growth rate first contracted by more than 6%, then grew by almost 9% and 7% respectively in FY 22 and 23 due to the low base. With these spectacular growth rates, India has regained its status as the fastest growing major economy, as many comparable economies struggled with low growth and recession. The growth rate is expected to range between 5.5% and 6.5% very conservatively during the current financial year, that is 2023-24, and with the median expectation of anywhere between 6.7% to 6.9%, and with the optimistic expectation of around 7% growth rate for 2023-24. Of course, the low base rate effect wears off. So that's where we got precisely a picture of the economy in the past 9 years. And then now let's take a look at the levels of average income in the past 9 years. As per 2020-23, the per capita GDP read as average income had risen to 1,15,490 rupees from 78,348 rupees in 2013-14, and average Indians' income increased by 47% in the past 9 years. Whereas, according to IMF data, India's estimated per capita income in 2023 will be around $2,600. The country had just passed Bangladesh in this metric. Bangladesh had surpassed, of course, India in 2019 in terms of per capita income. Bangladesh, however, is projected to regain its lead and be considerably ahead in the next 5 years, according to IMF. Of course, one can say Bangladesh is a small country and we cannot compare India's per capita income with that of Bangladesh because the population impact definitely counts over there when it comes to the per capita income, right? So, keeping it aside, according to IMF data, Indonesia has a per capita income of $5,020. Brazil has a per capita income of $9,670. China has a per capita income of $13,720. And the United Kingdom has a per capita income of $46,370. With these comparables, India is expected to have around $2,600 as per capita income in 2023. So that gives us a fair comparison of where we are standing when it comes to per capita income. Remarkably, the per capita income of India grew by 67% between 2014 and 2023 compared to 145% between 2004 and 2014. And now let's have an overview of inflation rates. During the months and years leading up to 2014, India had experienced double digit inflation. The high price of crude oil played a significant role in the problem. Between mid 2013 and early 2016, crude prices dropped from more than $90 per barrel to less than 30 per barrel. Except for the last 4 years, retail inflation has been well controlled. Inflation is expected to fall close to the RBI's 4% target for the current financial year. So, now let's move to changes in jobs and structural changes. In order to reduce the widespread poverty in a sustainable manner, job creation is more crucial than increasing GDP in the world's most populous nation, that is India. It's crucial for the economy to undergo a structural transformation in order to bring, if not move away, supplement their income also with that of manufacturing besides their agricultural income. The Modi government has attempted to repeal farm laws and implement policies like Make in India and production linked schemes, that is to say, production linked incentives PLI, in order to increase India's manufacturing capacity and absorb excess labor from the farm sector. Despite this, India continues to face considerable employment related stress. Government data indicates that unemployment levels reached their highest level in 45 years in 2017-18. The proportion of people seeking work, though, has decreased as well, so even high unemployment rates do not adequately capture the situation for the fact that the employment rate, the total number of working age people in the country as a percentage of the country's total population, has fallen sharply despite population growth. The problem of poverty and inequality. According to official estimates, poverty peaked in 2011. The World Bank's latest poverty report, published in October 2022, highlights 2 points. India is the country with the most people living in abject poverty. The number of people living on rupees 46 a day in 2019 was 137 million, and the number of people living on rupees 78 a day was 612 million. In 2020, poverty numbers increased by 23 million to 56 million as a result of the pandemic. In the World Inequality Report 2022, India is ranked among the most unequal countries. Top 10% of incomes are 22 times those of the bottom 50%. Since the early 90s, the divergence, of course, has increased substantially. Further, let's look at the stability of the financial system. Indian companies were over leveraged, that is to say, heavily indebted, when the Modi government took office in 2014. And banks had a growing pile of non performing assets, NPAs, that is to say, the loans that were not paid or repaid. preventing them from investing. In both these areas, the government of Modi has done a very good job. There is a 15-year low in corporate leverage at this point of time. The banks have reduced their non-performing assets considerably, and their capital adequacy ratio, a key measure of their financial health, has reached an all-time high. There has been an upward trend in the announcement of new projects, which of course is not surprising given the improved health of the banking system as a whole. Now, let's have a look at the changing exchange rates. The rupee's exchange rate against the dollar often reflect the reality of India's trade performance and its ability to attract foreign investors, since the majority of India's international trade takes place in US dollars. If India imports more than its exports, the exchange rate weakens as a matter of principle. Of course, cost of a dollar rises. If India's economy strengthens, it attracts more foreign investment and vice versa. India's rupee, of course, has shown sustained weakness, but this is not necessarily bad for a developing economy like India. That apart, let's look at the reforms in the economy. With its majority, the government has legislated long pending economic reforms. Here are a few key entries in a long list. 1. GST, a tax intended to simplify indirect taxation, has been successfully implemented by Modi's regime. Further, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which aimed to streamline insolvency proceedings, has taken up very well. Of course, the credit also goes to Modi's regime. And then, third, the Aadhaar system enabled a framework for identification. Here also, the government has shown remarkable commitment, make Aadhaar as a key identification part of the framework, providing financial services to the beneficiaries, making India a vibrant and robust digital economy. The government is leading the charge on this goal. More and more citizens are having access to the high speed internet, and they were also able to access government services and facilities such as direct cash transfers as well as private services such as UPI. Disinvestment of public companies, the sale of Air India, which had been stuck for 2 decades, underscores the government's commitment to moving out of loss making public companies. And then comes tax cut for corporations. To increase private sector investment in India, tax cuts for firms had long been advocated, and the same has been implemented in both letter and spirit by Modi's regime. Budget for capital expenditure. To avoid worsening the fiscal deficit, the government has often increased capital expenditure by reducing revenue expenditure in the last three budgets. That should also be appreciated. All in all, what's the result in the last 9 years? So to say, among the fragile five economies, India was ranked as one in 2014. Aadhaar and GST were stuck. Domestic inflation was high. Growth had slowed. The rupee was falling. Banks had NPAs. And inflation was persistently high in 2014, the then time at which Modi has taken over the regime. Despite many big economies struggling to grow in the global context in the post 2014 period, India's growth rate remains strong even after 9 years. India's growth rate remains even during these 9 years, that is to say, the post 2014 period. Internally, there is still much work to be done. The key metrics to target in the future are creating more jobs, increasing per capita income, and skilling Indians. Hope this will be taken as a priority by the government in the coming days. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.